In today's video, we'll be talking about abstract factory design pattern. This is again a creational design pattern which is very similar to factory design pattern. And this is why we should understand it properly to understand where factory design pattern will be used and where abstract factory design pattern will be used. There is a small difference, it's very similar, but it is very useful in interviews and in our day-to-day work. So stay tuned. Let's get started. Let's quickly summarize what factory design pattern does. Let's take our example of creating vehicle. Now a vehicle can be a car, a bike, it can be anything, right? So there will be an if-else block that if the vehicle type is car, create a car object. If the vehicle type is bike, create a bike object, right? So instead of having this if-else conditions in the client itself, we have it in our factory. Why? So tomorrow say there is another vehicle type, say there is a bus or there is a auto rickshaw or anything. We don't need to make any changes on the client side. We have decoupled it. So factory is going to take care of the creation part and client is just going to tell the factory that, you know what, I want a car object, create it and give it to me. Client doesn't care about how the implementation is happening, how the creation is happening. Maybe we have to change the creation logic, maybe we have to remove a vehicle type or we have to add a vehicle type. Our factory will take care of it and we don't have to keep changing our client side. Client will just keep running smoothly. Now let's say our client says that I want car and bikes, but I want of two different brands. I want of Hyundai also and I want of Toyota also. So how are you going to deal with this? There will be too many if blocks, right? That if it is Toyota and if it is car, create a Toyota car. Or if it is bike, if it is Hyundai, create a Hyundai bike. So how are you going to take care of this part? And again, client shouldn't have to worry about creation or how it is happening. There should be a library available which takes care of this. So this is where we use abstract factory pattern. See, it is actually very simple. If you have to explain to someone in just one line, all you have to say is that our factory design pattern was creating concrete classes or objects, and our abstract factory design pattern is going to create factories that is going to create objects. Basically, our abstract factory pattern is going to create a family of classes. Like in the example that we were talking about, in factory design pattern, we were using a vehicle factory to create car or bike, right? But in abstract factory pattern, what you're going to do is we are going to use an abstract factory to create different factories. Now, it could be a Toyota factory or it could be a Hyundai factory. And now Toyota factory is going to create car or bike, and similarly Hyundai factory is going to create car or bike. Let's quickly see the diagram and see how it's going to work. Let's see how the classes are going to look. Before we move ahead, let me tell you about the sponsor of the video. The course that I'm going to talk about is a course that I have personally taken and I personally highly recommend. And I'm not saying this only because Educative is sponsoring the video, but I highly believe that if you're someone who enjoys reading blogs instead of watching videos, and if you're looking for good high-level system design content, then do check out Grokking the System Design by Educative. They have some free examples also that you can check out to understand the kind of content that they have. They have very detailed explanation with diagrams. So you can check out the free examples and you can see that they have covered a lot of examples. And I would say that if you have gone through all of these examples, you're good to go for high-level system design interviews. So do check this out. And other than this course, also Educative has a lot of good courses. Don't forget to use the coupon code Keerti to get good discounts, and the link is in the description. As you can see in the diagram, what our client is going to do is it is going to use vehicle factory to create a car and a bike. So client doesn't have to care, okay, are you creating a Hyundai car, Toyota car? It's going to just tell the vehicle factory itself that I want a Hyundai vehicle or a Toyota vehicle. So depending on that, a Hyundai factory or a Toyota factory will be created. And if it's a Hyundai factory, it is either going to create a Hyundai car or it is going to create a Hyundai bike. Similarly, if it's a Toyota factory, it's either going to create a Toyota car or it's going to create a Toyota bike. So here basically you can see that there's one more level added. In factory design pattern, we were still using vehicle factory to create a car or a bike. But here there's just one more level thing that our client will tell the vehicle factory whether I want Hyundai factory or Toyota factory, and depending on that, car or bike will be created. So there is another layer added over here. If you have not understood till now, there is no need to worry. To understand the example and to understand the code, we are going to take an example that is more related to software development. Now say you're working on front end and you have to create a button or a text box. You could be working on any OS, right? You could be working on Windows, Mac, Linux, anything, right? But while creating button or text box, do you always mention that I want to create a button on Windows, I want to create a button on Mac? Nothing like that, right? Initially, when we start working on the project itself, we know that we are working on this OS type. So depending on the OS type, we should get the button or the text box in return, right? So how does this work? Let's understand this from the example. So in this case, you are the client and all you have to do is create a button or a text box. But you could be working on any OS type. Say you're working on Mac or you're working on Windows. So initially what you're going to do is you're going to create a factory. Say it's GUI factory and you're going to tell the GUI factory, you know what, I'm working on this OS. So depending on that, a Mac factory or a Windows factory will be created. And if you're working on Mac, when you say get me a button, it's going to return you a Mac button, and when you're working on Windows, it's going to return you a Windows button. So this is how it's going to work. But you as a client, all you have to do is initially while creating the factory itself, you have to tell whether you're working on Mac or Windows, and then you just have to call that, you know what, factory, create a button and give me, or you know what, factory, create a text box and give me. Now it's completely factory's headache to create a button or a text box, and you don't have to worry about how creation is happening. So tomorrow say you have to create a radio button also, and say you have to support another OS type also. So we have to make changes only to the factory. You don't have to make changes on the client side. And that is how things work, right? You just say that get me a radio button or get me this, and your factory should be able to create it and give it to you. I hope you have at least some idea now. If not, still don't worry, because now we are going to get started with the code and we are going to be writing code for this example. Let's begin with writing client code. The first thing that we do in our project is to see what OS type are we going to create buttons or text box for, right? That is going to be the initial thing. So I am going to just output that enter your machine OS, and I'm going to do enter, right? So for that we are going to store a OS type and we are going to take this as input. Now in order to create buttons or text box, you need to create a factory that is going to create buttons or text box for you. So now factory can be a Mac factory or it can be a Windows factory. You don't know, depending on the OS type, right? So because tomorrow another OS type could be added or removed, you don't want your client to change again and again. So we are going to make an interface factory from which Mac factory and Windows factory are going to be inherited. So it will be clearer. Don't worry about it. We'll write all the classes in details. It will be completely clear. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume there is an interface factory. And basically there is going to be an abstract factory that is going to create this particular factory, right? So let's say the factory that is being created is fact. And now there is another GUI abstract factory that's going to create factory for us. So I need to pass OS type to this, and depending on that, it is going to return me factory. See, again to repeat, there is an abstract factory. I am passing OS type to it. So I am going to pass whether it is Windows or it is Mac. So depending on that, it is going to create a factory for me that, okay, I want a Mac factory or a Windows factory. Since we don't want our client code to change again and again, we are going to inherit Mac factory or client factory from this interface I factory. So we won't need to change this code at all. So this I factory could be a Mac factory or a Windows factory depending on the OS type. Another thing is that for this GUI abstract factory, we are calling this function directly. So basically we are going to make the function static. Otherwise we could have just created an object of GUI abstract factory and then call the function. It's just that if you know the use of static, you can use it like this. Otherwise, to make it simple, you could have created GUI abstract factory object, and from that you could have called create factory function. Now that you have the factory, you can create your button or text box. Again, you don't care whether it is creating Mac or Windows text box. You have just told once that this is the OS that I am on. So again and again, you shouldn't have to tell. All you have to tell is that give me a button or give me a text box, right? Now again, we could be creating button on Mac or on Windows. We don't care. All we have to do is create a interface. So basically I button, and we are going to tell our factory that, you know what, you create a button and give us. So again and again, we don't have to tell that, okay, we are dealing with this particular OS type. We have told the factory that, okay, you have to create objects for this OS type. Now for this button, I will just write a function, say press, right? And similarly for text box also, there will be another interface that we are going to write like this, factory, and we are going to say create text box. And now this text box is basically going to say show text. So we have seen how client is going to use GUI factory to create button or text box. So now let's create these classes actually. Let's create the interfaces that we talked about. Let's start with writing the interface iButton. So basically we are going to write class iButton. So in every button class, what functionality should be there? Press, right? Now this is something that should be there in every button class. And we know that this is an interface. All the button classes will be inherited from this. It could be a Mac button or it could be a Windows button. It doesn't matter, right? So in this, what I'm going to do is in the public section, I'm going to write a pure virtual function. Let me tell you about it more. So basically by writing equal to 0, I have made sure it is pure virtual. I have made this class as interface, which basically means that any class that inherits from iButton will have to implement this press function. So let's inherit two classes, Mac button and Windows button. So writing class Mac button and inheriting it from iButton, and in the public section itself, I am going to implement the press. So basically right now I'm just adding a output statement that okay, Mac button pressed. And similarly we are going to have a Windows button inheriting from iButton. So let's write that as well. So this is going to be Windows button inheriting from iButton, and we are just going to change the output statement at Windows button pressed. Right, we have button now. Similarly we will have a text box also. So let's copy the same thing and let's make changes in this. So instead of iButton, it is going to be iText box. Now this is another interface that we are going to create, and in text box, instead of press, we are going to have show text, right? So instead of Mac button, it is going to be Mac text box, which is going to inherit from iText box, and we are going to say showing Mac text box basically. And similarly here it is going to be a Windows text box, and it is going to inherit from iText box, and in this it is going to be show text, and we are going to be showing Windows text box. See, we have implemented this part of the diagram. We have written a button interface and a text box interface. We have inherited Mac button from iButton and Windows button from iButton, and similarly Mac text box from iText box and Windows text box from iText box. So this part is done. Now we need to have a factory from which Mac factory and Win factory is going to get inherited. So now we are going to create interface iFactory, and since this is an interface, in the public section, we are going to add the functionalities that have to be present in factory. So what is the job of factory? It is going to create button or create text box for us, and we have to make sure that all the classes that inherit from this iFactory do implement those functions, right? So what we are going to do, we are going to write virtual. So we need iButton from this, and we are going to say create button. And since we have to make this pure virtual function, to make sure that it is implemented in the derived classes, we have to write equal to 0. Similarly, we are going to write virtual I text box, and we are going to write create text box and equal to 0 to make sure that okay, this is created. See, so basically our factory is going to create button and text box. We are not dealing with OS type at all because we are dealing with interfaces over here. So now what? Since we have implemented iFactory, we have to derive Mac factory and Windows factory from this. So let's write that also. So let's write Mac factory, and what is going to happen is it is going to inherit from iFactory, and what are we going to do? We're going to implement these two functions in it because they have to be present, right? So we are going to write iButton create button. So in this, all we have to do is now we are going to create new. Which button are we going to create? We are going to create Mac button because we are in Mac factory right now and we are implementing the function create button. So we are returning a Mac button over here. Similarly, in iText box, when we do create text box, what do we return? We just do return new Mac text box. we have interface factory and we have Mac factory. So similarly, let's have Windows factory as well. So we are going to call this Windows factory, and in create button we are going to create Win button, and in create text box we are going to create Win text box. So now we have factory also, which is going to create button and text box for us, right? So this factory we already have. The only thing that is left to do is to have this GUI abstract factory, which is actually going to create the factory for us. So let's implement this class also. So we are going to have GUI abstract factory, and in this we just need create factory, right? So as I said earlier, we avoided creating object of GUI abstract factory by just making this particular function as a static. Otherwise we would have to create an object, but since we have just one function, I think we can just make it static. So here we have to return I factory, and our function name is create factory, and we will pass a string type which will be OS type. And in this finally our if else condition will come, that if OS type is equal to say Windows, then what we have to do, we have to create new Win factory and return it. Else if OS type is equal to say Mac, then what we are going to return new Mac factory. See, there should be, ideally there should be a default factory also. So for now, for default, I am just assuming that we are creating Mac factory. So say if there is any wrong input, we are going to create a Mac factory and return it. Now let's run our code and see. If I run abstract factory, it's asking me to enter the machine OS. Say if I enter Mac, it's going to say Mac button pressed and showing Mac text box, because that is what happened. See here, we just gave the OS type, and depending on that it created the factory Mac factory, and from Mac factory we got Mac button and we got Mac text box. So it is happening. Similarly, let's say now I write Windows. So it's going to say Windows button pressed and showing Windows text box. And if you want to check the case for default factory also, so suppose I say QWERTY, and it created Mac because in the default section we created a Mac factory. To quickly recap, there was a GUI abstract factory to which we told that okay, this is our OS type, we are going to be dealing with this, and we told, you know what, we need a factory. So depending on the OS type, it created a Mac factory or a Windows factory, and then from the factory we told create a button or create a text box for us. So there were two layers involved over here. I hope from the code it was clear. If not, feel free to ask me any questions in the comments, and I hope you are liking the entire series of design patterns. And if you have seen the LLD roadmap video, then you know that factory and abstract factory are two of the most common and famous design patterns that you should know. It is going to help you a lot in low-level system design, and this is something that will help you in implementing your day-to-day work also. Let me know how you're finding the series. There is so much more content coming on both LLD and HLD. I'm really excited for this, and I need your continuous feedback for continuous improvement. So please do like, share and subscribe. It will mean so much to me. Thank you.